If your Achilles tendon has been bothering you for years and you've tried ibuprofen, cross massage, even going to a PT and it's still not getting better, well, I'm gonna tell you why in this video and the exact method that I use to fix Achilles tendon pain. What's up guys, my name is John Evans and I am one of the best vertical jump coaches in the entire world and probably the only person that created an entire system on how to fix tendons. This includes the patella and the Achilles tendon. It's research-backed, evidence-based, and I've talked to the best researchers in the world to make sure that it aligns with their recommendations as well as testing it with thousands of other athletes. Quick story for you guys. One of my best friends, Austin Oberg, in 2020 tore his Achilles tendon. During that time, he reached out to me and asked me how I would go about fixing it. So I gave him the exact method. I had him do isometrics, heavy slow strength work, and all of the other aspects of a good tendon rehab protocol. Long story short, within about a year, he was back to running, lost about 25 to 50 pounds, and to my knowledge has not had any Achilles tendon problems since. Now, you did just hear me mention ice, ibuprofen, cross massage, and a lot of other modalities that people recommend for Achilles tendon pain. But the research is very clear that these modalities do not work when it comes to dealing with long-term Achilles pain. I honestly believe this is why a lot of people end up stuck and not getting better and frustrated and just give up on the entire process. So by the end of this video, I'm going to tell you what causes Achilles tendon pain, why the modalities that people have typically used in the past don't work and what those big pitfalls are, and I'm going to tell you the exact method to get your Achilles tendon healthy and stay healthy. When we look at the research, it's very clear that there are three types of Achilles tendon pain. Over the last 20 years, Jill Cook and Ebony Reel have dived into what makes a tendon painful and how to get it healthy. And each of those stages means that you have to do something slightly different. So we're going to cover those stages, what's actually happening, and how to deal with each of the different types of tendinopathy. Okay, so first let's talk about what tendinopathy isn't. It isn't inflammation, which oftentimes people will say tendonitis. It doesn't mean the tendon is beyond repair. It doesn't mean that you can't make it better. By definition, tendinopathy means that you have dysfunction and you have pain. So what this means is that you have a cycle of loading a painful and dysfunctional tendon. So for example, maybe one day you feel a little bit of pain and you decide you want to go out and jump. Well, as a result, that load was higher than your capacity in that tendon, and now you end up in more pain. And this cycle continues on and on and on, your pain increasing and your function decreasing. And that is actually what tendinopathy is. So now let's go over the three different types of tendinopathy. The first is going to be reactive tendinopathy. And this is something that typically happens when a younger athlete or a newer athlete starts training for the first time. Maybe they've jumped way more than they ever had. They added a ton of load and they have an acute flare-up in the tendon. The next is going to be tendon disrepair. This means that the tendon is actually starting to lose function and its structure is breaking down. And as a result, you're going to start feeling pain and it gets to be a little bit more chronic. And the last one is going to be tendon degeneration. This is where the tendon has started to actually lose the structure that makes it rigid and strong, and you get into chronic pain that is very, very hard to deal with and hard to figure out how to make better. This last stage seems to be irreversible, and as a result, a lot of people freak out when they go and get imaging and they see that they have a degenerative tendon. However, I have some good news for you that if you have gone and gotten an MRI or an ultrasound and they have told you that you have a degenerative tendon or you have really, really bad tendinopathy, it doesn't mean that you are totally screwed. Just because it's irreversible doesn't mean that you actually can't get better. And the reason why is because people with degenerative tendons actually have more healthy tendon than they have degenerative tendon. Not only that, but they actually have more healthy tendon than people that don't have any tendinopathy whatsoever. Further, there are people in the NBA, there are people in pro sports that have degenerative tendons that don't have any symptoms whatsoever. If all of us were to get MRIs in the jump community, odds are that we would probably have a lot of degenerative tendon. But the thing is, we figured out how to get it pain-free and our function very, very high to the point that we're doing loads that are the most intense on a tendon without pain. So this should bring you peace of mind in that it doesn't matter what it looks like under imaging. Our goal is to treat the healthy parts of the tendon, get it to be fully functional and pain-free. For perspective, guys, in 2018, I partially tore my patella tendon. Now, it's not the Achilles, but during that time, I was looking at debridement. I was looking at getting the tendon re-sutured together to my patella bone and my tibia. But because of the things that I discovered during that time that I'm going to share with you in this video, I was able to get back to 100% effort. You guys have seen me make windmills, you've seen me make East Bays, and I'm a better jumper than I ever was prior to that patella injury. There's also athletes that I've worked with where they come in, they've gone to doctors for years and years and years. They tell me, I'm never going to get better. I'm always going to deal with this. It's never going to end up being pain-free. Their doctors recommend injections and all this physical therapy and all of these weird modalities that end up not making it better. But then 6 6 months into doing a proper load management protocol, they're back on the court, they have minimal pain, they're dunking, or they don't have any pain at all. And I've seen this happen thousands and thousands of times using the exact method to get the functional parts of the tendon really, really healthy, your pain down, and back to playing the sport that you love. So let's talk about the 3 types of loading that affect a tendon and cause pain, because it does matter in the type of recommendations that you give to yourself or your athletes. The first is going to be a friction-based tendon load. So this is essentially where the peritendon gets irritated from rubbing. We see this a lot of the time in cycling or in swimming because the tendon is rubbing all the time during those repetitive activities. The next is going to be energy storage and release. We see this one quite a bit in my expertise, which is going to be jumping and sprinting. This is any time that the tendon is storing and releasing a lot of energy very, very quickly. So things like upright sprinting, things like jumping, things like cutting laterally can be very, very provocative to the tendon. They're probably the most intense loads that the tendon will see, and as a result, they can cause pain and ultimately dysfunction. And the last is going to be compressive forces. Compressive forces have been shown to cause tendinopathy, and a great example of this is doing things like full range of motion calf raises, or things where your heel is going all the way down, dipping down into extreme dorsiflexion at the ankle, and it causes a lot of pain at the tendon. Now, identifying which of these 3 loads you are dealing with is really important, but typically it's just going to be related to what you're doing. So if you're a cyclist or a swimmer, you probably have peritendon pain, and it's probably due to friction. If you remove that and slowly rebuild it back in, it'll get better. If you have compressive loads, again, you need to take this out first and slowly reintroduce it. Things like doing full range of motion calf raises at the bottom can sometimes cause discomfort. Things like walking around barefoot, I've seen, can cause a massive amount of discomfort. And by removing this compressive load, especially if you have an energy storage load mixed with a compressive load, oftentimes it'll just get better. And then that energy storage and release one. So things like sprinting, things like cutting, things like running, all of these things are going to function to store and release energy in the Achilles tendon. And if you're doing too much of it, it can cause chronic long-term pain. So this is where things get a little bit more interesting. You might be watching this and thinking to yourself, well, if compressive loads and friction loads and energy storage loads are causing the pain, I'll just cut that out, I'll ice it, take some ibuprofen, and then go right back to the court and I'll be good to go. However, that is a major problem, and that is because tendons like load. So if you just remove all of the training that you're doing, you'll end up becoming even more dysfunctional and even more painful. By not training, all of the muscles surrounding that structural will get weaker, and this doesn't just include, again, the calf and lower leg. Your quads will get weaker, your hips will get weaker, your hamstrings will get weaker, and you'll end up more dysfunctional and in more pain when you return to those elastic activities. What's even more interesting, even if you just added loading on the opposite unaffected leg, you would actually see cross-sectional area changes to the affected leg. And this is something that is studied pretty extensively in research. Where we train an unaffected limb, it actually impacts the nervous system on the affected side, and you can retain a lot of qualities by doing this. So if we know that rest isn't the answer, we know that ibuprofen isn't the answer, and we know that loading too much could actually cause more problems, the question becomes, what do we do that will actually make the tendon better? And this is a very simple solution, and it is isometrics. I've talked about this for years. The first time I presented it was in 2018 or 2017 at Dunk Camp, and it's probably one of the only things that people walked away from during that lecture. And the reason why is because they are super effective. The reason why is because we need to load those collagen fibrils. We need to load the tendon. We want to desensitize the cortical inhibition that happens as a result of chronic pain, and as a result, more neural inhibition disappears and you end up in a better position. So if you have Achilles tendon pain, probably the easiest way to start doing this is a single leg calf raise hold on one leg. If your Achilles tendon is really, really bad, you can start with a double leg hold, but you want to hold it for about 45 seconds. Rest about 2 minutes and do this 3 to 5 times. There's also some additional research that I like from Keith Barr where he demonstrates that doing this every 6 hours is the maximum amount that we can tolerate. So how do you know if you're going heavy enough? Because this is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see athletes make when it comes to selecting their isometric. You know, because your pain level will decrease by about 50% across those 5 sets. So if you come in, you do your isometric calf raise and your pain is, let's say, a 7, by the end of the 5th set, it should be dropping to about a 3 or a 4. If it's not dropping that much, then you're probably not going heavy enough. And this is a major problem that I've seen athletes make when they are rehabbing any tendon. The reason this works is because we are reintroducing load. We're going to take care of some of that neural inhibition that I previously talked about. If the tendon can adapt and we can start to reverse the disrepaired parts of the tendon and take care of some of those reactive parts, then we'll actually start to get a more functional and stronger tendon by doing these isometrics. Now, if the load isn't heavy enough body weight, then you're probably going to need to add some external loads. So you can start by maybe holding a dumbbell. You can go on to a belt squat, or you could do a seated calf raise even if you don't have access to a belt squat. You could also just do the standing calf raise machine at the gym, or you can just hold a barbell on your back, lean on the rack, and then hold that isometric position. One big caveat here is that you're gonna wanna stay out of that compressive position. Typically, we're not gonna see friction loads bothering a lot of athletes because we don't do a lot of cycling or swimming, but you're gonna wanna be at that tippy toe top position on the ball of your foot, holding the weight in this position. In my experience, I found that athletes that do it at the end ranges or even neutral will end up making it a little bit worse. And the biggest thing you wanna avoid with an Achilles tendon is being in too much discomfort when you're doing your isometrics. And when I say discomfort, I specifically mean discomfort caused by compression. Okay, so the next thing that you're going to want to integrate is heavy, slow resistance training. Previously in the research, a lot of people were recommending heavy eccentric exercises, and oftentimes this would actually make the tendon worse. And the reason why is because it wasn't the eccentric muscle contraction that was actually functioning to get the tendon stiffer and the muscle stronger. It was the fact that it was slow. So when I say slow, I mean you need to stand on a plate or something like that, all the way up and go down over 3 to 4 counts, sometimes even longer, pause for a second and go up again slowly. The biggest mistake that I see when people do this is that they will go slow on the down phase and then pop out of the bottom. The reason why that's bad is because it turns into an energy storage and release type exercise. And again, these are some of the most provocative loads. And by actually trying to get the tendon healthy, you're gonna make it worse by doing this exercise wrong. Now to touch on that energy storage and release point, again, because you are now going from an isometric hold to a full range of motion or at least 3/4 range of motion slow exercise, you are now adding velocity to the range of motion. This is gonna prepare the tendon for those faster elastic activities that you're going to progress into, as well as desensitizing the pain that you have in that tendon, removing the inhibition and increasing the muscle mass of the lower leg. Now, my brother is a distance runner and he has run into, pun not intended, a ton of different Achilles tendon issues. He'll go out, he'll run 20 or 30 miles and he just thought he could just sub in some isometrics and that it would probably deal with the problem. But that wasn't the case. And when I introduced heavy, slow resistance training to him, his Achilles improved dramatically. He went from running anywhere from about 5 to 10 miles a week to building up his heavy, slow calf raise and eventually getting to the point where he was back to running 100 miles a week. Sets and reps on this, I typically like to start with about 4 sets of 6. The loads I will start with are lighter because we're now adding a velocity and change of direction into that, even if it is slow. And I will build up the intensity of these heavy, slow resistance training exercises. If it causes discomfort in these specific modalities, I actually like to go a little bit lighter. Again, I don't like to push into too much discomfort in the Achilles tendon during compressive loading. So remove that compressive loading. If you feel a little bit of discomfort during the calf raises and it feels worse the next day, then you know you've probably done too much. All right, so the last phase of getting a tendon back to being pain-free is doing energy storage exercises. And this is where most people mess up because they'll understand the isometrics and maybe they'll only do that. And maybe then they'll realize, oh, I still have pain. So then they'll do their heavy, slow strength training and they'll feel good. And then they'll go back to jumping and they still have pain. And the reason why is because they don't add this crucial step of energy storage. The reason why is because, again, tendons are going to function to store and release energy. So if you don't prepare them to store energy fast, then they're definitely not going to be able to store energy fast and then release that energy fast. So we first need to teach the tendon and the body to handle storing energy very, very quickly. We do this typically by doing depth drops. This is super simple. All you're going to do is stand on a box and step off of it, landing on the ball of your foot. During these drops, the loads are really, really high and it's very, very fast. And it might be a little bit uncomfortable at first, but again, we always want to pay attention to the pain levels at the 24 or 48 hour mark. Tendons will pretty much always have a delayed response if they're degenerative or in disrepair. And as a result, we want to pay attention to that 24 to 48 hour mark. I will always ask my athletes the following day after they do something, how does your tendon feel? And the reason why is because it tells me if they did too much. If your pain level is going up after doing that energy storage exercise, then it probably was too much and you need to decrease the height of that box. It means you weren't ready for the load that you placed on that tendon and your function isn't high enough. If that is the case, it's not a big deal. You just return back to the heavy, slow strength training, wait until you're a little bit stronger, and then try to reintroduce those depth drops. It can be a little bit tedious and time consuming, but it does work. Once they can handle those depth drops, then you can function to add in a counter movement jump. So for this, you would start out by warming up with your isometrics and your drops, and you would build into a counter movement jump. Now, counter movement jump might seem pretty knee heavy, but you do store and release a lot of energy in the Achilles tendon, and it is very, very controlled, which is why I like it. So maybe you start by doing 10 drops and 5 box jumps, jumping up to a box the first session, and then the next session, you actually take the box out and you do a standing vertical jump. And then the next session, if you handled that well, you can build into doing regular approach jumps. Now, once you're at this point, typically this is where I will use a timer and start timing sessions. Once athletes can handle that max approach effort jump, I really try to pay attention to how much they're warming up and how much they're doing max effort jumping, because this will function to increase their total capacity and over time get them healthy so they can handle full training loads without any problem. So there you have it, guys. The answer isn't icing. It isn't ibuprofen. It is going to be a very dialed in load management program with isometrics, heavy slow resistance training, and elastic energy storage and release. If this video was maybe way over your head and you still don't understand how to get your Achilles tendon healthy, consider going and clicking the link in the description. Right now, we're actually offering a 6-month discount. So if you pay for the annual plan, you actually be paying for 6 months of coaching if you pay for the month-to-month coaching. So it is a hell of a deal. It is 50% off if you were to pay month-to-month compared to buying the annual plan. I'm super confident that we can get you guys healthy who do have Achilles pain, or if you just want to jump higher. I hope this video was informational, and I'll see you guys next time.